All right, hello, everybody. Welcome back. I know it's been, I want to say a little, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks tops since my last post. Things will be a lot more consistent from here on out. I just, the whole adjustment to a new job, getting in the not just routine, but just like getting into it. So with that being said, there's been a lot happening. And I've talked about it on my social medias. I've talked about it on my streams. Streams are much easier to do in terms of content because I don't have to prep. I don't have to research. I don't have to do all that. But with that being said, if you've been in my, not research as much, right? Okay. But, with that being said, my streams are going to consist of like just chatting, politics, human rights stuff, just different stuff that's going on that I want to discuss. And then we'll get to the game portion, and that's pretty much how I'm going to be setting up my streams from now on. Just an FYI. So hey, come for the beginning, come for the middle, come for the end, whatever you guys want to stay for. Any support's much appreciated there and here. With that being said, one of the things, the many things that came across my eyes, of course, the U.S. starving Cuba, imminent war with Iran, Gaza still struggling, two flotilla announcements, a second Globo Sumad flotilla, and then I believe the Nuestra flotilla. I know, guys, for being a Mexican, I've always been self-conscious about my pronunciation of Spanish words. And it's kind of one of those things to where, like, when you come from a background that's like people criticize you a lot, and then you kind of get like really self-conscious and nervous about talking Spanish, and then you never really fully develop it. So that's me. I never fully learn how to pronounce and take the time to pronounce really well. So I struggle here and there. But anyways, so we have that flotilla. So that was some more news. Of course, more Epstein files, both in terms of DOJ deleting Epstein files that they released, DOJ refusing to release any more, and Massey and Rokana going in and seeing more of them. Seeing more of the unredacted, but not the fully unredacted, because they still redact that. I agree that this is the worst cover-up in U.S. history, or if you even want to go further to say global, if you have the knowledge to say so. But I'm going to say, what does that say about us who don't hold them accountable, by the way? If it's that bad, what does that say about us, huh? Just putting that out there. Anyways, yeah, so many things came across. Some I'm not even mentioning because I can't think of at the moment, but trust me, I know there's more there. And of course, you have the bills that they keep trying to sneak through, right? Including this one. So I was on Twitter and I saw someone talk about this, and they said how this was like very a new piece of legislation that's going to the Senate floor soon, that really focuses on government regulation and controlling what we see online and online media. All right. So this is called S3546, also nicknamed the Sunset Section 230 Act. Guys, these nicknames that they come up with are just like, because of who it's coming from, I'm always like, why? Anyways, to the point, this was introduced to the Senate December 17th, 2025, read twice and referred to the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. Okay. The sponsor, none other than Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina. We've all heard about Lindsey Graham at this point. So this has been introduced, read twice, not voted on yet. So if you hear this video or you hear this somewhere else and you decide you want to reach out to your senators, your House reps, now's the time. All right. Okay. So 119th Congress. Okay. So we're going to get into this. Okay. I did deep dive into this. This is actually kind of like, you're going to see some themes emerge that are really questionable, especially in context of pedophilic elite government cover-up, and ongoing censorship efforts, okay, on the part of said government regime. I don't know, you guys, you tell me what you see. Maybe you'll see something I didn't, but here we go. S3546, to repeal Section 230 of the Communications Act of 1934. In the Senate of the United States, December 17th, 2025, Mr. Graham for himself, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Hawley, Ms. Klobuchar, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Mrs. Moody, and Mr. Welch. introduced the following bill, which was read twice and referred to the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, to repeal Section 230 of the Communications Act of 1934. So that's going to be the base of what they're doing with this bill. But through the bill, they added a lot of little other little things where they take out, they replaced references to this bill that they took out. And the thing is, I found interesting is where the references are that they're switching out. Okay. So, like, what other pieces of legislation are the 230 of the Communications Act mentioned that they are switching? Okay. Be enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as the Sunset Section 230 Act. Section 2, repeal of Section 230. In general, Section 230 of the Communications Act of 1934. In other words, 47 USC 230 is repealed. Okay, guys. So just to clarify, they want to repeal 47 USC 230, and what that actually is this. So they want to repeal this whole thing, okay? Okay, 230. And you let me know if you think that what I'm about to read to you is actually something you want to have out there. It's actually good legislation. Because if it is, if you find it good legislation, which I do, that leaves the question, why are they removing it completely? Because I'm telling you right now, what they remove out here, they aren't putting it back in some other little section, okay? And we'll get to that. All right, here we go. 230, protection for private blocking and screening of offensive material. All right, A, findings. The Congress finds the following. The rapidly developing array of internet and other interactive computer services available to individual Americans represent an extraordinary advance in the availability of educational and informational resources to our citizens. 2. These services offer users a great degree of control over the information that they receive, as well as the potential for even greater control in the future as technology develops. 3. The internet and other interactive computer services offer a forum for a true diversity of political discourse, unique opportunities for cultural development, and myriad avenues for intellectual activity. 4. The internet and other interactive computer services have flourished to the benefit of all Americans with a minimum of government regulation. 5. Increasingly, Americans are relying on interactive media for a variety of political, educational, cultural, and entertainment services. Okay, so here are the policies connected to this section, okay, to 230. It is the policy of the United States, 1, to promote the continued development of the internet and other interactive computer services and other interactive media. 2, to preserve the vibrant and competitive free market that presently exists for the internet and other interactive computer services, unfettered by federal or state regulation. 3, to encourage the development of technologies which maximize user control over what information is received by individuals, families, and schools who use the internet and other interactive computer services. 4, to remove disincentives for the development and utilization of blocking and filtering technologies that empower parents to restrict their children's access to objectionable or inappropriate online material. And 5, to ensure vigorous enforcement of federal criminal laws to deter and punish trafficking in obscenity, stalking, and harassment by means of computer. And another word for that is cyber stalking, right? Okay. C. And that little part of cyber stalking is just my reading of that, okay? By the way, that's not actually, it doesn't say cyber stalking in here. Okay, C. Protection for Good Samaritan blocking and screening of offensive material. Treatment of publisher or speaker. No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as a publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. Civil liability. No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be held liable on account of A, any action voluntarily taken in good faith to restrict access to or availability of material that the provider or user considers to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected. Or B, any action taken to ensure or make available to information content providers or others the technical means to restrict access to material described in paragraph 1. Okay, and then we have D, obligations of interactive computer service. A provider of interactive computer service shall, at the time of entering an agreement with the customer for the provision of interactive computer service, and in a manner deemed appropriate by the provider, notify such customer that parental control protections such as computer hardware, software, or filtering services are commercially available that may assist the customer in limiting access to material that is harmful to minors. Such notice shall identify to provide the customer with access to information identifying current providers of such protections. And then it goes on to the effects this has on other law. In just a brief overview, no effect on criminal law, no effect on intellectual property law, no state law, no effect on communications privacy law, and no effect on sex trafficking law. Okay? And then it goes into the definitions. Okay. So this whole section they want to repeal. And when I was reading this, one of the things that popped out to me was when they talked about when you notify, the little piece in here, when you notify parents of tools where they could monitor or restrict harmful content to their children, and that you're talking about repealing that reminded me, and that's less protection that parents can have or knowingly have for the children, for their kids, in terms of online content that they're being exposed to. Okay, so this reminded me of in Texas, and I believe it was like the end of last year going into the beginning of this year, when they were trying to put the 10 Commandments out, right, into schools. And along with that, if you looked into it, some of the school legislation they were trying to, some of the legislation they were trying to put through was also to limit parents' ability to, like, you know, get a hold of their kids during school, to not have a say in what the kids are taught. Okay, and not being able to, like, interfere with that. Okay, there were little things like that were coming out, and this reminds me of it, you know. And then the idea that they're involving TPUSA and other Christian nationalist groups to heavily weigh in on education, and in the form of, like, after school activities or field trips that the children would take, that parents only had, like, a limited amount of, like, control to change, right? This reminded me a lot. It's like removing these safeguards, and it like leaves the question why and how it all connects to that, how it all connects to each other, because it does. And I think at the end of the day, as much as, like, you kind of want to think, oh, that's a little conspiratorial, thinking everything connects, I think the Epstein files have taught us that it does. It very, very much does. Okay, so this is something they want to repeal completely. Okay, that's the basis of this bill again. And then we go into B, conforming amendments. 1, Communications Act of 1934. The Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S. 151 is amended. Okay. And if you're wondering what U.S. 151 is, it's the Federal Communications Commission creation. So a brief overview of this is for the purpose of regulating interstate and foreign commerce and communication by wire and radio, so as to make available so far as possible to all the people of the United States, without discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, or sex, a rapid, efficient, nationwide and worldwide wire and radio communication service with adequate facilities at reasonable charges, for the purpose of the national defense, for the purpose of promoting safety of life and property through the use of wire and radio communications, and for the purpose of securing a more effective execution of this policy by centralizing authority hereafter granted by law to several agencies, and by granting additional authority with respect to interstate and foreign commerce in wire and radio communication. There is created a commission to be known as the Federal Communications Commission, which shall be constituted as hereinafter provided, and which shall execute and enforce the provisions of this chapter. Okay, again, what they're doing here, by taking out 47 U.S. 230 and the little changes they're making, that's going to affect that as well, the FCC purpose, or legal purpose, I should say. Okay, so then we go into A of this little conforming amendment section. In section 223H, 47 U.S.C. 223H, by striking paragraph 2 and inserting the following. Okay, guys, this is actually kind of insane. Okay, so this is 47 U.S. Code 223. Obscene or harassing telephone calls in the District of Columbia or in interstate or foreign communications. Okay, so it's really important that we pay attention to the subject matter of what these pieces of legislation that they're editing or striking out are. So they said H, paragraph 2. So we go down to H. which is intentional disclosure of non-consensual intimate visual depictions, okay? And part 1 of this is definitions, and part 2 is where they're going to strike. They're going to edit it out. So this whole under 2, this whole section that I'm about to read you, they want to strike out completely, and then they want to replace it, okay? And you really do have to ask these questions of why they decided that this is no longer important, this piece. Because as you're looking at this, listen to what I'm telling you they're taking out. And then as we're going through the legislation, then ask yourself, wait, did they put any of that back in somewhere else? Or did they rephrase it differently? Or did they put extra protections? Or, did they adjust it in a positive way? Offense involving authentic, intimate visual depictions involving adults. Except as provided in subparagraph C, it shall be unlawful for any person in interstate or foreign commerce to use an interactive computer service to knowingly publish an intimate visual depiction of an identifiable individual who is not a minor if 1. The intimate visual depiction was obtained or created under circumstances in which the person knew or reasonably should have known the identifiable individual had a reasonable expectation of privacy. 2. What is depicted was not voluntarily exposed by the identifiable individual in a public or commercial setting. 3. What is depicted is not a matter of public concern. And 4. Publication of the intimate visual depiction is intended to cause harm or causes harm, including psychological, financial, or reputational harm to the identifiable individual. So that's part A of 2. They're striking that out completely. And then part B, except as provided in subparagraph C, it shall be unlawful for any person in interstate or foreign commerce to use an interactive computer service to knowingly publish an intimate visual depiction of an identifiable individual who is a minor with intent to abuse, humiliate, harass, or degrade the minor, or arouse or gratify the sexual desire of any person. They're cutting that whole piece out too. C, exceptions. Subparagraphs A and B shall not apply to 1. A lawfully authorized investigative, protection, or intelligence activity of a law enforcement agency of the United States, a state or a political subdivision of a state, or an intelligence agency of the United States. 2. A disclosure made reasonably and in good faith to a law enforcement officer or agency as part of a document production or filing associated with the legal proceeding, or as part of medical education, diagnosis, or treatment, or for a legitimate medical, scientific, or education purpose, or in the reporting of unlawful content, or unsolicited or unwelcome conduct, or in pursuance of a legal, professional, or other lawful obligation, or to seek support or help with respect to the receipt of an unsolicited intimate visual depiction. 3. A disclosure reasonably intended to assist the identifiable individual. 4. A person who possesses or publishes an intimate visual depiction of himself or herself engaged in nudity or sexually explicit conduct, as that term is defined in section 2256(2)(a) of Title 18. Or 5. The publication of an intimate visual depiction that constitutes 1. Child pornography, as that term is defined in section 2256 of Title 18. Or 2. A visual depiction described in subsection A or B of section 1466A of Title 18 relating to obscene visual representations of the sexual abuse of children. Okay, again, reminding you. A, in section 223H, 47 U.S.C. 223H, by striking paragraph 2. Okay? That's all paragraph 2 that they want to strike out. And what they want to replace it with is going off of the first paragraph, which was paragraph 1, which was the definitions. They just want to add another definition. The term interactive computer service means any information service system or access software provider that provides or enables computer access by multiple users to a computer server, including specifically a service or system that provides access to the internet, and such systems operated or services offered by libraries or educational institutions. And the reason why I kind of laugh at this is because I'm just baffled, because they're taking out all that verbiage for protections for children. All right, again, y'all, they're taking out that whole section and just replacing this one extra definition of interactive computer service, which is not to say that definition isn't important, but you got to ask yourself why they, instead of just expanding in Section 1, they decided to omit Section 2 entirely whenever it contains safeguards for children, okay? And helps parents with safeguards for children. Okay, and then you get to the next one. In Section 231b4, 47 U.S.C. 231b4, by striking or Section 230. And when we go to 231, again, 47 U.S.C. 231, restriction of access by minors to materials commercially distributed by means of World Wide Web that are harmful to others. Okay? And they go to B4. B is inapplicability of carriers and other service providers. And you go down to 4. Similarly engaged in the transmission, storage, retrieval, hosting, formatting, or translation of any combination thereof of a communication made by another person without selection or alteration of the content of the communication, except that such person's deletion of a particular communication or material made by another person in a manner consistent with subsection C or section 230 of this title shall not constitute such selection or alteration of the content of the communication. So they want to strike out just this little piece of reference to section 230. Okay. Trademark Act of 1946. Section 45 of the Act, entitled An Act to Provide for the Registration and Protection of Trademarks used in Commerce to carry out the provisions of certain international conventions and for other purposes, approved July 5th, 1946, commonly known as the Trademark Act of 1946. 15 U.S.C. 1127. Is amended by striking the definition relating to the term Internet and inserting the following. The term Internet means the international computer network of both federal and non-federal interoperable packet switch data networks. Okay, so this is, for your knowledge, is mentioned in other pieces of legislation, and they're just inserting it here as well, okay? Title 17, United States Code, Section 1401 of Title 17, United States Code, is amended by striking subsection G. Okay, so if we're going to go to Title 17, because we want to know, right, what exactly they're striking. Okay, first of all, Title 17, U.S. Code 1401, unauthorized use of pre-1972 sound recordings, okay? And then when you go down to G, and this one actually is pretty beefy in the content, but you go all the way down to G, application of Section 230, Safe Harbor. For purposes of Section 230 of the Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S.C. 230, subsection A shall be considered to be a law pertaining to intellectual property under subsection E2 of such section 230. Again, striking out that whole thing because they're taking out all these little, or not little, when you think about when you think about the weight of it, right? They take out this whole little section. So that's going to be strike through completely. That's gone. And then you go to the next piece, Title 18, United States Code, Part 1 of Title 18, United States Code, is amended. Okay. Okay, so this is, I thought, was another little interesting piece, all right? Because Title 18 of the U.S. Code is crimes and criminal procedure, okay? And for the first couple, I believe the first three, yes, which we're going to go through, they're taking out, again, references to the Communications Act of 1934. 1462, specifically, importation or transportation of obscene matters, okay? And then you go in here and they already reference the Communications Act of 1934. Okay, that they want to take out completely. And then they want to replace it with a different reference, as defined in Section 223 of the Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S.C. 223, okay? So 47 U.S.C. 223 is obscene or harassing telephone calls in the District of Columbia or an interstate or foreign communication. A. Prohibited acts generally. Whoever, 1, in interstate or foreign communications, by means of a telecommunications device, knowingly makes, creates, or solicits and initiates the transmission of any comment, request, suggestion, proposal, image, or other communication which is obscene or child pornography with intent to abuse, threaten, or harass another person. By means of a telecommunications device, knowingly makes, creates, or solicits and initiates the transmission of. Again, though, when you think about the specific subject, obscene or harassing telephone calls in the District of Columbia or an interstate or foreign communications, okay? All right. Any comment, request, suggestion, proposal, image, or other communication which is obscene or child pornography, knowing that the recipient of the communication is under 18 years of age, regardless of whether the maker of such communication placed the call or initiated the communication. Makes the telephone call or utilizes a telecommunications device, whether or not conversation or communication ensues, without disclosing his identity and with intent to abuse, threaten, or harass any specific person. Makes or causes the telephone of another repeatedly or continuously to ring with intent to harass any person at the called number, or makes repeated telephone calls or repeatedly initiates communication with the telecommunications device, during which conversion or communication ensues solely to harass any specific person. 2. Knowingly permits any telecommunications facility under his control to be used for any activity prohibited by paragraph 1 with the intent that it is used for such activity. Shall be fined under Title 18 or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both. Okay, next section of this. B. Prohibited acts for commercial purposes. Defense to prosecution. Whoever knowingly within the U.S. by means of telephone makes directly or by recording device any obscene communication for commercial purposes to any person, regardless of whether the maker of such communication placed a call, or permits any telephone facility under such person's control to be used for any activity prohibited by subparagraph A, shall be fined in accordance with Title 18 or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both. Whoever knowingly within the U.S. by means of telephone makes directly or by recording device any indecent communication for commercial purposes which is available to any person under 18 years of age to any other person without the person's consent, regardless of whether the maker of such communication placed the call, or permits any telephone facility under such person's control to be used for any activity prohibited by subparagraph A, shall be fined not more than $50,000 or imprisoned not more than 6 months or both. I don't know about y'all, but those are really, really small sentences, okay? Not to mention, I just think in terms, when you get to shall be fined not more than $50,000 and the people that are currently involved in this kind of subject matter, that's nothing to them, okay? That's actually our taxpayer dollars, by the way. All right, 3. It is a defense to prosecution under paragraph 2 of the subsection that the defendant restricted access to the prohibited communication of persons 18 years of age or older in accordance with subsection C of this section and with such procedures as the commission may prescribe by regulation. In addition to the penalties under paragraph 1, whoever within the U.S. intentionally violates paragraph 1 or 2 shall be subject to a fine not more than $50,000 for each violation. For purposes of the paragraph, each day of violation shall constitute a separate violation. 5A. In addition to the penalties under paragraphs 1, 2, and 5, whoever within the U.S. violates paragraph 1 or 2 shall be subject to a civil fine of not more than $50,000 for each violation. For purposes of this paragraph, each day of violation shall constitute a separate violation. A fine under this paragraph may be assessed either by a court pursuant to civil action by the Commission or any attorney employed by the Commission who is designed by the Commission for such purposes, or by the Commission after appropriate administrative proceedings. 6. The Attorney General may bring a suit in the appropriate district court of the U.S. to enjoin any act or practice which violates paragraph 1 or 2. An injunction may be granted in accordance with the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. C. Restriction on access to subscribers by common carriers. Judicial remedies respecting restrictions. A common carrier within the District of Columbia or within any state or an interstate or foreign commerce shall not, to the extent technically feasible, provide access to a communication specified in subsection B from the telephone of any subscriber who has not previously requested in writing the carrier to provide access to such communication if the carrier collects from subscribers an identifiable charge for such communication that the carrier remits in whole or in part to the provider of such communication. And I know this is like a lot of information, and try not to glaze over some of it, like just like your eyes glaze over, right? is might be a lot to ask, but it's good information to have. Except as provided. Okay, so let's get back to it. 2. Except as provided in paragraph 3, no cause of action may be brought in any court or an administrative agency against any common carrier or any of its affiliates, including their offices, directors, employees, agents, or authorized representatives on account of A. Any action which the carrier demonstrates was taken in good faith to restrict access pursuant to paragraph 1 of this subsection, or B. Any access permitted in good faith reliance upon the lack of any representation by a provider of communications that communications provided by that provider are communications specified in subsection B, or because a specific representation by the provider did not allow the carrier acting in good faith a sufficient period to restrict access to communications described in subsection B. 3. Notwithstanding paragraph 2 of this subsection, a provider of the communication services to which subscribers are denied access pursuant to paragraph 1 of the subsection may bring an action for a declaratory judgment or similar action in a court. Any such action shall be limited to the question of whether the communications with which the provider seeks to provide fall within the category of communications to which the carrier will provide access only to subscribers who have previously requested such access. Okay, and then we have section D. Sending or displaying offensive material to persons under 18. Whoever, 1, in interstate or foreign communications knowingly, A, uses an interactive computer service to send to a specific person or persons under 18 years of age, or B, uses any interactive computer service to display in a manner available to a person under 18 years of age. Any comment, request, suggestion, proposal, image, or other communication that is obscene or child porn, regardless of whether the user of such service placed the call or initiated the communication. Or 2, knowingly permits any telecommunications facility under such person's control to be used for an activity prohibited by paragraph 1 with the intent that it is used for such activity, shall be fined under Title 18 or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both. That's insane. That is insane. Okay, E, defenses. In addition to any other defenses available by law, 1, no person shall be held to have violated subsection A, D, or H solely for providing access or connection to or from a facility, system, or network not under that person's control, including transmission, downloading, intermediate storage, access software, or other related capabilities that are incidental to providing such access or connection that does not include the creation of the content of the communication. 2. The defenses provided by paragraph 1 of the subsection shall not be applicable to a person who is a conspirator with an entity actively involved in the creation or knowing distribution of communications that violate this section, or who knowingly advertises the availability of such communications. 3. The defenses provided in paragraph 1 of the subsection shall not be applicable to a person who provides access or connection to a facility, system, or network engaged in the violation of this section that is owned or controlled by such person. No employer shall be held liable under this section for the actions of an employee or agent unless the employee's or agent's conduct is within the scope of his or her employment or agency, and the employer, A, having knowledge of such conduct, authorizes or ratifies such conduct, or B, recklessly disregards such conduct. 5. It is a defense to a prosecution under subsection A1, B, or D, or under subsection A2 with respect to the use of a facility for an activity under subsection A1B that a person, A, has taken in good faith, reasonable, effective, and appropriate actions under the circumstances to restrict to prevent access by minors to a communication specified in such subsections, which may involve any appropriate measures to restrict minors from such communications, including any method which is feasible under available technology, or B, has restricted access to such communication by requiring use of a verified credit card, debit card, adult access code, or adult personal identification number. 6. The communication may describe measures which are reasonable, effective, and appropriate to restrict access to prohibited communications under subsection D. Nothing in this section authorizes the commission to enforce or is intended to provide the commission with the authority to approve, sanction, or permit the use of such measures. The commission shall have no enforcement authority over the failure to utilize such measures. The Commission shall not endorse specific products relating to such measures. The use of such measures shall be admitted as evidence of good faith efforts for purposes of paragraph 5 in any action arising under subsection D. Nothing in this section shall be construed to treat interactive computer services as common carriers or telecommunications carriers. Violations of law required commercial entities, nonprofit libraries, or institutions of higher education. 1. No cause of action may be brought in any court or administrative agency against any person on account of any activity that is not in violation of any law punishable by criminal or civil penalty, and that the person has taken in good faith to implement a defense authorized under this section, or otherwise to restrict or prevent the transmission of or access to a communication specified in this section. 2. No state or local government may impose any liability for commercial activities or actions by commercial entities, nonprofit libraries, or institutions of higher education in connection with an activity or action described in subsection A2, or D, that is inconsistent with the treatment of those activities or actions under this section, Provided, however, that nothing herein shall preclude any state or local government from enacting and enforcing complementary oversight, liability, and regulatory systems, procedures, and requirements, so long as such systems, procedures, and requirements govern only interstate services, and do not result in the imposition of inconsistent rights, duties, or obligations on the provision of interstate services. Nothing in this subsection shall preclude any state or local government from governing conduct not covered by this section. And then application and enforcement of other federal law. And then you go into the intentional disclosure of non-consensual intimate visual depictions. In other words, the pieces where we talked about. This is also in 2, where they take out that whole section of offense involving authentic intimate visual depictions. Okay? That was the second item on the docket for the conforming amendments. That's, I don't know, interesting doesn't begin to cover it. Okay, so that's the first time in this section in Title 18 that they switch out the references. The second one, 1465, production and transportation of obscene matters for sale or distribution. Okay, and then they go in and they take out this little piece of section as defined in Section 230 E2 of the Communications Act of 1934, and replace it with the 47 USC 223. Okay. And then the third reference that they go into here as well is Section 2257. All right. That's going to be a little further down. 2257 is Chapter 110, Sexual Exploitation and Other Abuse of Children. Okay. And we go down to 18 U.S. Code 2257, record-keeping requirements. Okay, and then it's going to be H2BV that they're going to be adjusting. So, Section H, they talk about the actually sexually explicit conduct. And then you go down to BV, which is the transmission, storage, retrieval, hosting, formatting, or translation, or any combination thereof of a communication without selection or alteration of the content of the communication, except the deletion of a particular communication or material made by another person in a manner consistent with Section 230C of the Communications Act of 1934. So that they're going to cut as well. And we go into Section 2421A. In 2421 is Chapter 117, Transportation for Illegal Sexual Activity and Related Crimes. Okay? And we're going to start at 2421A. Promotion or facilitation of prostitution and reckless disregard of sex trafficking. I'm telling you guys, it's not... The themes here are just like... are crazy obvious. And then in subsection A and B... A and B, you see these two? Section 230, Communications Act of 1934 references. Again, Section 230, Communications Act of 1934. They're going to omit those two, okay, as well. And then we're going to go to the Controlled Substance Act. Section 401H3A22 of the Controlled Substances Act. 21 U.S.C. 841 H3A32, don't worry, I'll show you guys, I know that's a lot, is amended by striking, except that deletion of a particular communication or material made by another person in a manner consistent with Section 230C of the Communications Act of 1934 shall not constitute such selection or alteration of the content of the communication. Okay, Section H of 21 U.S.C. 841, offenses involving dispensing of controlled substances by means of the internet. So we go to H3. Inapplicability. A32. The transmission, storage, retrieval, hosting, formatting, or translation, or any combination thereof of a communication without selection or alteration of the content of the communication, except that deletion of a particular communication of material made by another person in a manner consistent with Section 230. Okay? So they want to take out everything after except that deletion, okay? So they want to keep in the transmission, storage, retrieval, hosting, formatting, or translation, or any combination thereof of a communication without selection or alteration of the content of the communication. And then that whole, except that deletion of a particular communication and material made by another person in a manner consistent with Section 230, they're going to take that out, okay? On point 6 of this bill, the Webb Kenyon Act, Section 3B1 of the Act entitled, An Act Divesting Intoxicating Liquors of Their Interstate Character in Certain Cases, approved March 1, 1913, commonly known as the Webb Kenyon Act. 27 U.S.C. 122B1 or BB1 is amended by striking as defined in section, again, it's the same kind of thing as before, okay? 27 U.S.C. 122B1 is, well, first of all, general provisions, okay? And then you go into B, that's inapplicability to service providers, and then you go to 1. Authorize any injunction against an interactive computer service as defined in section 230F used by another person to engage in any activity that is subject to this act. Again, reference, striking it out. And then they go to Title 28 United States Code, Section 4102 of Title 28 United States Code is amended. Okay, so in this one, there is a little bit more content here than just, I mean, even the references were important that they crossed out, okay? But when you see what they omit and what they don't bring back in, I think it's very telling, all right? Title 28 United States Code, Section 4102 of Title 28 United States Code is amended, A, by striking subsection C. Okay. First of all, we're going to go into 28 U.S. Code 4102. Recognition of foreign defamation judgments. And we want to strike subsection C. All right, let's go down and see what they want to strike out. Judgment against provider of interactive computer service. So this whole thing I'm going to read you, they want to take out. 1. In general, notwithstanding any other provision of federal or state law, a domestic court shall not recognize or enforce a foreign judgment for defamation against the provider of an interactive computer service as defined in Section 230 of the Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S.C. 230. Hey, you know what? After this, if these references stick, I call that a win. Unless a domestic court, for you guys, determines that the judgment would be consistent with Section 230 if the information that is subject of such judgment had been provided in the United States. Number 2, burden of establishing the consistency of judgment. The party seeking recognition or enforcement of the foreign judgment shall bear the burden of establishing that the judgment is consistent with Section 230. Okay, that whole thing they want to strike. And then in subsection E, you have 1 and 2. The rule of construction. Nothing in this section shall be construed to 1. Affect the enforceability of any foreign judgment other than a foreign judgment for defamation, or, and they want to take out construe to effect. So this part and this, and they want to replace it with construe to effect. And that, I think, is for a little bit more clarity on these little 2 points. But I think they're still important to recognize. And then 2, they want to strike defamation or, and all that follows. And then just inserting defamation. That part is interesting. So they're going to cut out limit the applicability of Section 230, which makes sense. And then we got our last couple of points here. 8. Daniel Andrel Judicial Security and Privacy Act of 2022. Section 5933(7) of the Daniel Andrel Judicial Security and Privacy Act of 2022. 28 U.S.C. 601, note preceding Public Law 117 and 263 is amended by striking another reference to Section 230 of the Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S.C. 230, and inserting Section 223 of the Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S.C. 223. Okay. And then we go to Title 31 United States Code, Section 5362(6) of Title 31 United States Code is amended by striking Section 230F of the Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S.C. 230F, and inserting Section 223 of the Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S.C. 223. And when you go into Title 31 United States Code, Section 5362(6), well, 31 U.S. Code 5362 is the definitions for prohibition on funding of unlawful internet gambling. Okay. And then 6 is the Interactive Computer Service. And they want to take out this little reference, right, to the Communications Act of 1934. See, you kind of get the hang of it as you're going through. And lastly, 10, National Telecommunications and Information Administration Organizations Act, Section 157 of the National Telecommunications and Information Administrative Organization Act, 47 U.S.C. 941 is amended, okay? Which is this one. Child-friendly second-level internet domain. And they want to strike subsection E in its entirety, okay? And if we go down to E, treatment of registry and other entities. In general, only to the extent that such entities carry out functions under this section, the following entities are deemed to be interactive computer services for purposes of Section 230C of the Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S.C. 230C. A, the registry that operates and maintains the new domain. B, any entity that contracts with such registry to carry out functions to ensure that content accessed to the new domain complies with the limitations applicable to the new domain. C, any registrar for the registry of the new domain that is operating in compliance with this agreement with the registry. And then part 2 of this, nothing in paragraph 1 shall be construed to affect the applicability of any other provision of Title 2 of the Communications Act of 1934, 47 U.S.C. 201, to the entities covered by subparagraph A, B, or C of paragraph 1. Okay, so that whole subsection E strike out. And then, of course, because of that, they're going to redesign subsections F through J as subsections E through I, respectively, just to make it flow a little better. And then C, effective date. The amendments made by this section shall take effect on the date that is 2 years after the date of enactment of this act. Also keep in mind the date. So, yeah. Overall, nothing that you see that they took out in terms of Section 230 was replaced with anything better or equal in terms of protections. So I think it's interesting to see those themes of like where they decided, like where Section 230 applied in other legislation, and the fact that they are omitting it or striking it out, and what that means, right? So it's not on the Senate floor yet. It's still coming. It's definitely something that is not being talked about much at all. But as I said when I started this video, it's up to you guys what you take out of it. Call your senators, call your House reps, tell them how you feel about it. But this is something they're trying to push through, and I really don't like what the lack of protections means, especially for children. But I don't know, you guys tell me what you thought. I'm pretty sure there's a lot I didn't put together in this, because this is a lot of different moving parts. All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next video.